Are you going to bring them back in or no? You are? Okay, so we'll make sure you're here then. Okay. All right, so 5 through 9 go with Miss Nayla and all the other ladies. You are dismissed. Junior Quiver, 10 through 13. General Pernack is right here. All righty, 10 through 13. Aaron, you know what we're doing, right? You got it? Thank you very much, sir. 10 through 13, you are dismissed. Senior Quiver, 14 through 18. Follow General Dahl that way. You are dismissed. All righty. So, who is going to help me out with the microphone? I was going to say, I'll have to find a volunteer if I don't have one. I thought the people in the Army, they learn never to volunteer. You probably need to turn it on. I don't know that it's on. All right. So, I know this kind of seems hasty compared to how we usually do things, but we're going to have, the classes are going to come back in here a little before 5, and then we're going to have the bar mitzvah service for young Mr. Davis. So we're going to try to give everybody plenty of time to do their classes and such. So then, does anyone have anything that they would like to say and share with this congregation? That Miss Ingrid Tyree. When Ingrid speaks, it's kind of like E.F. Hutton.
I don't know about that. I guess I just wanted to testify that, the Father showed up today again, and he presented a message that I felt like was just for me, but I know that's not the case. I feel like it was for probably many of us, but, it was just confirmation in getting ready this morning, and things heavy on my heart, and he told me to bring my petition to him, not to talk to about anybody, not to, send a prayer request out to any friends or anything, that I was supposed to bring it to him and bring my petition before him. And I didn't know what that was going to look like. But he also told me to come with joy and praise, and that I was supposed to expect that he would hear what I had on my heart. And when you use that word, petition, I even second-guessed myself when you said, does somebody have, you come in here heavy burdened and heavy laden, and I was sort of like, is that really me, heavy laden? And then you said, well, something that you can't get off your heart, you can't get out of your mind. And I was like, I threw up my hand, and that's big for me because I won't even give it credence, but there are things in the past where I don't ask for prayer corporately. I don't necessarily want, or didn't want, I should say, I did not want in the past for people I didn't know who was praying for me. And man, I shot up that in my hand, and he spoke to me. And when she was singing that song, Incense Rise, and was singing that song, it was just beautiful. And he just said, he didn't tell me yes or no. He didn't tell me what he was going to do. He just said, you'll know that whatever happens from this point on, I have heard you, and it is my plan, period, the end. And I was like, yes, sir. And at the very end of that, when the song ended, in my head, it wasn't audible or anything like that. I just heard a voice that said, let the pruning begin. And it was powerful. And then you spoke about pruning, and I know that's been a sort of a theme, but it was not even on my mind this morning, but it was powerful. It was a very, very, very powerful message. And I just want to thank the Father for using you as his conduit, and it was beautiful. Just to testify that of his greatness.
Well, I will testify then. It just, you don't know. Well, maybe you do. I get up here and I feel like I'm supposed to say something, and you just never know. Or at least I feel like I can never know for sure that this is the right thing, right time, right way. So I'm thankful that he moved you in the way he did and to testify, because, see, that helps me. that encourages me. And it gives me more and greater confidence, not in me, but that he's got this whole thing in control, right? And he's orchestrating it all. So thank you very much for doing that. That's a great encouragement. Okay, does anybody else have something right away ready to go? Otherwise, I will go to the board. Bill, could you explain briefly why you follow the Hillel calendar? I got an answer from somebody. What's that name? Anyway, just playing. Got an answer from Rico. Could you also explain, thanks and Abba's best blessings? Briefly. Key word. First of all, we have covered this before in times past, but I readily concede that there are calendar issues. I don't know that anyone has it all figured out. I know that people who argue for this calendar or for that calendar, they have their reasons, and I could sit and listen to somebody argue about why you should do it this calendar, why you should do that calendar, and I go, yeah, I see, I get it. But then I hear the other argument, I see that too. And so it's the calendar issue for me, and consequently for this congregation, because this is where I'm at with it. Because there are so many different ideas. And I do not believe that any one person has the authority to speak on behalf of all of God's people to resolve this issue. I have personally chosen to go with the last instruction that was given many, many, many centuries ago to those who established the Hillel calendar. Based on what it says in Deuteronomy, if there's a thing that's too hard for you, you bring it to those who are in leadership at that day and the time, and what they say, that's what you do. You don't turn to the right, you don't turn to the left. In fact, there's a warning that goes along with that. So I have taken that to mean in this particular issue calendar that there are people who were closer to how things were done in the days of the temple than I, who would know more than I. I do not believe that it was a conspiracy to, mess everybody up. I don't believe that. In fact, I believe it was an attempt to try to make sure that all of God's people were somewhat on the same page where the calendar issues were concerned. I could go through history and show you how very, very significant events have happened where Israel's concerned, God's people's concerned, and how it lines up with the date according to the Hillel calendar, suggesting that at the very least, even though there's probably problems with the calendar, that at the very least God responds to what his people are doing, and he, to some degree, honors it. And so with the idea of trying to somewhat be on the same page, I've just chosen to stick with the Hillel calendar. And not that I believe it's perfect. But what we've had in the last 10, 15, 20, 25 years with different ideas about the calendar, what it has done, it has sectioned God's people off, and we've got people keeping holy days at all different times, and we're not together. We're not doing it together. And many years ago, I was at a congregation out in Amarillo, Texas, and there was a man, some of you probably know this fella, but he had a congregation out there, and when I was there during Yom Kippur, he says, he talked like this here, kind of almost like the Godfather, but with, a Latino flavor to it. But anyway. Anyway, I can do it, but I'm not. Anyway, I don't have enough cotton in my mouth. So anyway, he says, man, Bill, after this year, I'm going back to the Hillel calendar. I'm going to have 3 Yom Kippur services in a row, like 3 days in a row. Point being, people are spread out all over the place. So I know you asked briefly, but I can't do this one briefly. It is with the idea of, to some degree, trying to stay on the same page, unity where unity is possible. So I'll sum it up this way. This is going to sound like I'm going off into a different teaching. Maybe I am. But most of you who listen to me anytime, you know that I believe that Elijah represents the wild branch, or you should know that. And you know why, right? Because he was a Toshav. He was one of the Toshvim. And a Toshav was someone who was a resident alien, a foreigner who had joined themselves to the house of Israel. And that's what it says he was. He was Hatishbi Metoshavi. He was a Tishbite of the Toshvim. So, again, suggesting that he was not born ethnically into Israel, but that, like others, he had joined himself to Israel. Point being this: who comes in advance of the Messiah at Passover announcing the coming of the Messiah? Elijah the prophet, right? Right? So if Elijah does represent those of us who've been grafted into the tree, is supposed to come and herald the coming of the Messiah to our Jewish friends, it's going to be kind of hard if he's keeping Pesach at a different time.
That's right. Preach it.
I am going. I won't do it. No. So there are things that obviously we disagree with our Jewish brothers on. Obviously. There are some things that, for unity's sake, I go along with it because I don't think it's necessarily something that I have to draw a line in the sand. And the calendar issue is one of those. And so I choose, for the sake of unity in this respect, to operate by that calendar with a couple of, little deviations, slight deviations maybe. But also with the understanding that when we all get into the kingdom, the Messiah is going to be the one authorized to put things back the way they're supposed to be. Until then, I go on the last order that was given. If there's something that's too hard for you to figure out, and apparently this is one of those things, somebody brought it to the judges back in the day. They made a decision. They established a calendar that Israel has operated on for a long time. And so I could go into a lot of other reasons, but that's some of the main points. Now, let me tag this onto the end. If you are of a different view, if you think it should be this calendar, or based on the sliver or the conjunction or however you want to do it, I'm not going to get in an argument, and I'm not going to dispute, and I'm not going to contradict. I'm just going to say that as a congregation, we need to be somewhat on the same page and do things together. And it lands to me and Beth to make a determination how we're going to do that. As individual families, follow your conscience, but as long as you're not trying to subvert and undermine what's going on where the congregation at large is concerned. Does that make sense? All right? Let's just be respectful of one another. So again, that wasn't brief, but trust me, it was brief compared to what we could have gotten into. All right, so yes. Yes, sir. How are you today?
Doing really well. My name is Bruce. This is my wife, Brenda. This is our very first time with the microphone, so any
don't blow it.
Any thoughtful prayers sent up would be appreciated. I had a word yesterday, but before I share that, a good brother of mine, Ben Parson, he sent a text, and this was what was on his heart. So I'll read that to you. It's Isaiah 56, 1 and 2. This is what the Lord says: protect justice and carry out righteousness, because my salvation is coming very soon. My righteousness is ready to be revealed. How blessed is everyone who does this, who grabs hold of it, who keeps the Sabbath, and does not profane it, who holds back his hand from doing any evil. And so I started studying the whole of chapter 56, and it talks about if you're a foreigner or if you're a eunuch, don't allow those in your group, those folks who are keeping the Sabbath, don't allow those groups of people to exclude themselves, but welcome them in, encourage them. And I think that word, that chapter, I see the link to what was shared today, Bill. And as I was studying that and meditating on that, the word that I got from the Lord was that He desires my best at all times, and especially in these times. So like when we're shopping, it's not it's good, better, or best. And sometimes I bring my good, sometimes I bring my better, and other times I bring my best, right?
Yeah.
But I believe what he's asking is for me to bring my best at all times. And of course that has context and situation depending on who you're with, what the relationship is, and whether it's a neighbor or it's your wife or a brother or sister here. But I felt really challenged, exhorted by that word. And it was specifically for me, but I think it perhaps could apply more broadly. And so I wanted to share that.
Thank you, sir. If I may just tag this on, I feel he's asking us, in addition to what you said, in conjunction with what you said, that he's asking for our all when we're in our best, when we're in our better, and when we're in our not as good. He's still asking for all of us. And that's kind of what's been on my heart, to kind of go in tandem with what he's placed on your heart. He wants all of us. And so, but thank you for sharing that. You did pretty good for the first time. We have a little badge that we give the rookies on their first time. No, I'm just playing. No, I'm just playing. Thank you, sir. Michigan, right? Is that right? Yes. Okay. Where I mean, are you, I know that you'd moved down here from Michigan, right? You were in, was it Georgia? Okay. Well, I remember we talked a few weeks ago at a different event, right? But I remember you guys were from Michigan, right? But you're not going back to Michigan? No, we're here. Okay. Well, you've seen the light. Hallelujah. All right. No. I'm just playing. All right. All right. Does anyone have the microphone? No. Yes.
Hey, Bill. In reading this week's Torah portion, a word that stuck out to me this week from other years of reading it was the word holy or kadosh. And I mean, Korah used it, Moses used it, the Father used it. I mean, it was just all through it. And I really realized that I don't grasp the significance or comprehension of the word kadosh, holy, and just wondered if you could share on that.
Right.
What you know.
Well, let's talk about the point that you initially made. Moses used the word, Aaron used the word, the Father uses the word, Korah uses the word. And it seems to me that there is one aspect of this is that we understand holy based on where we're at and from our perspective. You know, Korah used it in a totally different way. You know, everybody's holy, you know. Moses used it in a different way. So their perception, perspective, vantage point, it helped determine what holy meant to them. And it seems to me that the closer you get to the Father, and Moses got pretty close, the closer you get to the Father, your understanding of holiness is going to change. It's going to change the closer you get to him. Hence what I was sharing this morning, what I've kind of been talking about the last few weeks. You know, where we started out as a congregation, for instance, you know, we were just getting together. We felt like the Father was blessing what we were doing. We saw fruit. We saw people growing. We saw, you know, you guys came, for instance, you know, found a home. Your children seem to love it here. We've seen them flourishing. You know, this is our perspective anyway. So those things were happening a lot. And no person takes credit for that. We just knew that the Father was doing something, you know. But now we've come to a place that as he's continuing to do that, I feel that he wants our perspective on kadosh or holy be set apart to look a little different than what it looked like the other day and what it looked like in times past. So what I'm trying to say is, I don't think any of us fully comprehend what holy means. When the Creator says, I, the Lord, am holy, now you be holy, and what that entails. I grew up in an environment where holiness meant that ladies never wore pants, they didn't cut their hair, they didn't wear makeup, and then other congregations had their view of holiness, and our Jewish friends have their view of holiness, and everybody's got their perspective. But what I'm saying is, the closer we get to him, the more we see his point on what that means. And that's where we want to go. So I don't have the answer to your question in regard to exactly what it is, because I'm learning more and more each and every day. No, it means this too. It means shelving that. It means doing this. It means not saying that. I don't want to use the word evolves, but that's the best word I can think of at the time. It grows, it matures. My understanding becomes a little more clear. The glasses that we're looking through darkly, the closer we get to him, the clearer we see these things. I will say this. That to truly be what he's called us to be is going to be a sifting process. It's going to be a sifting process because, unfortunately, some will find that it costs far too much. And so in the end, holiness, in my mind, equates to the whole idea of take up your cross and follow me. That's all the way, and whatever's required. We can dress it up on the outside and make it look holy, but he's going to go picking the leaves up and looking behind them to see what's growing underneath. And so this is what needs to be sought out. And we need to let him search our hearts and bring it to the surface, those things that need to be purged. So anyway, I'm running around Mount Sinai a little bit. But what I'm trying to say is, I don't know that anybody understands it. But our understanding is going to grow the closer we try to get to him, because we're going to see what it costs to be that close to him. So I'm thankful for the Messiah, that he has paved the way. He removed that partition, he removed that veil, so that we have access to the Holy One of Israel. But it's still going to be up to me to take the steps to walk through and to go in and to abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And that's going to cost me a lot. It's going to cost everybody a lot. Did that make any sense at all? Kind of, sort of, halfway? All right. Bill, seeing that the Torah and Haftarah, I'm going to answer this one, but let's try, if we can, to deal with things that are from the Torah portion first, and then we'll try to get to other things. Bill, seeing that the Torah and Haftarah readings are set, why do the New Covenant writings vary among congregations' teachers? We are about to celebrate our first year in this walk, and thank Abba for Jacob's tent. Because it's, as far as how the Torah portions are arranged, let me back that up. As far as the readings that go along with the Torah portions in the Haftarah, there's no commandment. It's not set in stone anywhere. So I would imagine that some congregations think that this portion of the New Testament fits better with what the Torah portion and Haftarah is all about. Some have just, started in Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, and just divided it up so that it's paired with different parts of the Torah portion. So I would guess that the variation is probably the user's choice, and so there's no reason that you can't read this part of the Gospels or the writings of Paul or whoever with that Torah portion. There's no reason that you can, or that you have to do those particular ones. It's just, it's just different thoughts occur to people about what goes with what. And that would be my guess there. I mean, if I were going to do it, in fact, we were talking, Melissa, right? We were talking about this with Robert and Melissa the other day. Should I is Melissa in here? Should I let the cat out of the bag, what you were working on as far as the Torah portions? No, I shouldn't? I already have. In time, not Tuesday. But in time, we'll have something that you can have for the Torah portion readings in the Haftarah, and we were talking about making sure that the gospel selections, for instance, kind of have something in common with what's in the Torah portion. All right. So we're just going to kind of do it, based on what we think goes with it. So there's no commandment. There's nothing set down that you can't have to do it a certain way. All right. That's the best I know how to answer that question. I'm not one of those people that gets stuck in tradition that I can't make some modifications. I think everybody who here knows that. I will change the schedule. We will do things a little differently if it feels like we're supposed to do it that way. So, all right. Yes. Oh, well.
Thank you so much. The word came to me as we were talking about holiness, and about what you're talking about is recalibration.
How so?
Is to recalibrate. Well, I was looking up the definition, and recalibrate is to calibrate again. These systems gradually drift off course so that the navigator periodically needs a fresh point of reference to recalibrate the navigation system. So as we continue to pursue on this journey, it's a process of recalibration.
Okay.
And with that said, if I may, I just wanted to...
If it's what you texted me about, I would rather not do that right now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. That's part of a recalibration.
Okay. I can see that because, you think, well, I'll use myself as the example once again. I'm in a boat, I'm on a big body of water, I can see the shore, and I know I'm heading to the shore, but as we get closer to the destination, you have to recalibrate, right?
Yeah, because of the pressures
right,
and this.
because of all the things that are going on. Mm-hmm. So you have to reassess things. Yeah, I get that, yeah. But I also want to add this, that holiness is really just about self-denial. Saying no to me, saying no to him. And so, yes to him, excuse me. Yes, that's what I meant. See, my tongue got ahead of my brain. Or my brain got ahead of my, never mind. Anyway, what was I going to say?
Recalibrate.
Yes. Okay. But in saying yes to him, he doesn't unload everything on me at one time. And so as we move closer, I get that. That works. I like that. All right. Thank you. Well, that was easy. We'll take a break until 5. No, well, I knew it was going to happen. Back there in the back. Every time I do that, and the hands start going up.
Just to make sure people know I don't show favoritism.
Mr. Bergen.
So I'm going to be honest, this is more just coming. So I'm kind of forming this as I speak, I guess. It's not really a question, it's more of a comment from last week's Torah portion.
Okay.
So one of the things that's always bothered me a little bit is this idea of corporate punishment and punishing all of Israel for the mistakes of a majority, right? But I was reading it, and it's very clear that all the congregation did what they did. And I'm talking about chapter 14 of Numbers. A lot of the time in our modern thoughts and our when we just talk amongst ourselves, we're always like, why would they do that? We would do better. And I just have to say, you won't. None of us will do better in this situation, especially when we're going from our own hearts and our own minds. We're not capable of doing better. We would like to think that we would do better in a situation like the Israelites were in. But how many times do we complain day to day?
You want me to answer? No, go
it's
ahead.
not really a
Go ahead.
question. How many times do we really complain day to day, God, why would you do this? Or why aren't you doing this? I can tell you for myself, every single day, all day long. So am I really better than those Israelites in the past? I'm not. And kind of what I'm getting to is, without Yeshua leading us in this path, none of us are going to get to the land, whether it's the physical land or his holy land. We have to rely on Yeshua. We cannot look at each other and say, wow, look at what they're doing. I'm already doing so much better. If you're saying that, then no, you are not doing better than the person next to you. You cannot look at the people next to you. You can only look at yourself, and you have to work on yourself day to day, and you have to allow the Messiah to work through you.
Amen and amen. And that thought, or that concept, is exactly why I believe Moses was not allowed to lead the people into the land. Not ignoring what he was told, and that he did not hallow God in the eyes of the people when he struck instead of speaking to the rock. But I think it becomes very important to understand that Moses was not going to lead the people in the land, because that was reserved for somebody else, Yehoshua, who is a pattern in the Messiah, meaning no man, no woman, no ministry, no congregation is going to lead the people to the ultimate destination. Only Yeshua is going to be doing that. We are going to have to look to him. And this may sound a little disconnected, but in my mind, it is definitely connected to that idea. It's, just before his crucifixion, he told people, he said, you will see me no more until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And it used to always puzzle me as to why he said that. But then when I realized he was reciting Psalm 118, and then you see what is in the verses right before he says that, the people are having to acknowledge, save me, save us now, save us, save us, save us. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. The one who comes in the name of the Lord is the one who's coming to save us. So what he was getting at was, you're not going to see me anymore until you come to the realization that you can't save yourselves, that no one's going to be able to save you. I'm the only one who can save you. And when you get to that place and you're saying, Hoshana, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, then I'm going to appear again. So thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Thank you for that reminder. Who's next?
Hello, Father.
Hello, my son. Speak.
Yes, sir. So, I have a question written down here. It's not very long, but something I've been wondering about for a while. So,
Let me ask you, does this have anything to do with what we've been talking about?
Yes, sir, the Torah portion.
Okay, very good. All right.
So, with the overall theme of this portion being the rebelling against those whom God has placed in authority, and with the 4th of July coming up, I was reminded of a question that I've been thinking about for a while. So when I was thinking about this portion with the way my mind works, which should be no surprise to you, I started thinking about the story of our country's founding.
You are your father's son.
So we know that Korah incited a rebellion against Moses by questioning Moses' authority because he was perhaps dissatisfied or jealous, whereas our founders eventually no longer recognized the authority of George III because of his tyrannical behavior. So there's an obvious difference in that Korah's personal rights were not being violated while the personal rights of our founders were being violated. And even while our founders were in the process of disassociating from the authority of England, they did make attempts at reconciliation through the Olive Branch petition and similar initiatives. However, King George was the authority placed by God over the colonies, and we've also seen in Scripture where God has placed tyrants in a position of authority over his people. So my question is, how do you reconcile the different outcomes of the rebellion of Korah and the revolution of the founders? Furthermore, while we should submit to authority, while also not blindly following them, at what point do we, from a certain perspective, seemingly quote-unquote rebel by saying enough is enough to those placed in authority over us should that time come?
Where did you learn all that? Okay. My answer is this. Paul talks a lot about how we should respect those people who are in authority. The scripture talks about how God is the one who raises up kings and he puts down empires. So we don't arbitrarily rebel against someone because we don't like them or even because it's obvious that they are wicked. We don't necessarily rebel against them. But when those who are in ruling positions impose their will upon us in a way that would force us to break his laws, that's when we are commissioned to take a stand. You know, now how far do you take it? As far as America, you know, I would just say look at the fruit initially anyway, and how God has used the nation, whether we believe it was ordained or not, and some people don't believe it was. I do. But you look at the fruit initially, and generally speaking, what has America been for the nations of the world in terms of a stabilizing force? All those things tell me that God has used the nation. So in my understanding of things, that seems to be fruit justifying what happened in 1775 and beyond. That being said, it's not an excuse for us to rebel against everyone who's in authority that we disagree with, or who we even think is being tyrannical. I mean, I'm not going to mention any names right now, okay? But in the end, when someone says, you must obey me, and obeying them forces me to disobey him, then I'm going to say no. And so the people I think of in that scenario are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. And they did it respectfully, by the way, right? They did it respectfully. And they said, we know that you're a king of kings. We know that you've been given authority, et cetera, but this decree would compel us to break God's commands, and this we cannot do. And so you're just going to have to do what you've got to do. To me, that's not rebellion. That's allegiance and loyalty to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So, did I somewhat answer your question?
Yes, sir. That's just something I've been thinking about for a while because George III didn't...
Hold the mic a little closer.
George III didn't necessarily tell, the colonists to, follow what I say over what the Bible says. And, the founders made the argument he was violating their God-given rights. And I'm sure that's a different discussion, but it's something I've thought a lot about because you compare our quote-unquote rebellion to other rebellions throughout history, such as the French Revolution, and it seems as though the outcome of ours was much better than any others recorded in history.
That's why I said look at the fruit initially, and look at what it's meant. I mean, the French Revolution, pardon us while my son and I have a conversation here. The French Revolution was democracy in action. That's what democracy looks like. You hear all these people, this is what democracy looks like. No, the French Revolution, that's what democracy looks like. Because democracy, by definition, is mob rule. And so the laws and the rules would change from day to day. The people who were enforcing the laws on one day were taken to the guillotine the next day because they had broken somebody's rule that happened overnight. So you look at the fruit of that, and then you look at the fruit of what happened as a result of the American Revolution. Were there some hotheads? Absolutely there were. Were there people who incited it? Absolutely. Okay. Was there legitimate reasons to bring grievances? Yes, there were. So we are in this particular scenario. We're fortunate enough to be able to look back, and have, to be able to look at it from a different perspective than the people who are actually going through it. But that's probably why a lot of people, so-called Tories didn't, because, there's this whole biblical idea of, respecting those who are placed in authority. So at the end of the day, we're probably going to really need to be able to hear the voice of God, above the din, above all of the noise that's going on. We're going to have to be able to hear the voice of God, and what is he saying in this? So generally speaking, it honors God when we honor authority. When we respect, I mean, you think about Paul and those people, look at the rulers they were subjected to, tyrants, murderers, many of them. But everything they did with respect to God's laws and God's, what God had established. And even though they did not revolt in the conventional way, they were carrying out a revolution that changed the world then, and it's still having effect in the world today. So there is a way to launch a revolution against tyranny, and it doesn't always have to be with bullets and bombs. We can carry on this conversation later tonight, okay? I'm sure these people are about to go to sleep, so.
Over here, Bill.
Okay.
Steve Day.
Yeah, you're not going to believe this, but what I have
I don't believe
went right along the same lines.
All right.
But it might not be what you think. What I was impressed with this morning, and I'll see what you think. But in Romans 13, 1 through 7, it says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath over the wrongdoer," which we've seen some of God's wrath in the Torah portion, correct? To the wrongdoer. "Therefore, one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For because of this, you also pay taxes. For the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed to them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed." Now, not saying that this does not have anything to do with, I'm not saying that this doesn't have anything to do with governing authorities like in government, like we know today, which, I'm sure that applies, but that's what I've always heard it was about. But after reading the Torah and the Haftarah, which was Samuel, I believe it was, and both were dealing with following authority. And the authority such as Moses and what assignments people had, such as the Levites, et cetera, and so forth. And it wasn't really talking about a secular government in those scriptures. And here, I know it says pay taxes, but they also paid a half a shekel tax in the temple. Okay. So, and maybe Howard Dahl could add something to this, I don't know. But that made me think, well, yeah, we were to respect, police officers and judges and so forth, but this could be, especially based on what we've read in the Torah and Haftarah, is that it's referring to the leaders in the congregation.
Well, I do believe it applies to that. I just believe it applies to both.
Yeah.
I don't think it has to be one or the other. It is authority that God has established in whatever the scenario is. And whatever that authority that he's put in place should be honored, should be respected. Of course, to balance it out, he expects a lot of those that he puts in those positions of authority to oversee, and especially when they're put in places of authority to oversee his people. So I think it's both, and this is the classic Hebraic view as opposed to the Greek view. The Greek view says it's got to be this or it's that. Hebraic view is, no, it's that, and it's that, and it's that, you know. And so I believe it's civil authorities, government authorities, but it's also the authorities that God has established in his congregation and in his people. Which then I'll springboard off of that to say that just because someone who is in the body, who doesn't necessarily see things exactly the way we see them and carry them out exactly the way we carry them out, who am I to say that God isn't using them in some way? I need to respect the fact that he might be using them in a way that is way above my head to understand. I would disagree with him on this and that and this method or what have you, but if it's bearing fruit, who am I to say that's not God? You know, I need to be careful, in other words, to be respectful of those that God has put in different positions throughout the body.
Yes, and I think it tends to be human nature for people to do things like that, to come against what has been put in place. I mean, I'm sure everybody here can relate to the workplace where they've seen people who almost, everybody could do it better. And, they have attitudes like they could do it better, or they know this and they know that. And I've been an instructor before, and I've seen people go as far as this certain task that they're supposed to be able to do, they're unable to do it, but they can tell somebody else how to do it. So, I mean, and I've had to stop people from doing that more than once, especially if they had family members that did it before them. But, yeah, it seems to be human nature for people to think that they can do it better,
Or I don't have to do it.
Yeah, or I don't have to do it or whatever, Why do I need to do that? Yeah.
It is human nature, but it's a part of our nature that we as believers need to suppress and overcome. I mean, I admit that when I was a younger man, if someone said, you can't do that, I'd say, you just threw the gauntlet down. Watch this. Of course, now, I know some other people in my family that do it in a different way. Yeah, I'm talking about you. She said, bring it. Okay, so you go out to a restaurant. You look at the menu. You look at the menu item. It says, no substitutions, please. What's the first thing she says? Can I get this instead of that? I'm just playing. And she usually gets her way, so. I'm just playing with you. Now I'm scared. Apparently I have a reason to be. Was it she's, look at her. Brielle has her hands down here like, oh, God, oh, God, You're just so cute. Anyway, I got to get back to work, though, okay? Was it the fire of Yahweh that consumed the 250? Okay, was it the fire of Yahweh that consumed the 250, the thing that made the censers holy? What I read and what I understood was the fact that those censers had been used to approach the altar, and that because they had been used for an offering in that regard, that they were then considered holy. I would think that the fact that those men, and it even brings this out in the Torah portion, that those men did that and paid for it with their life, plays a part in that. But it says that because they offered in those censers, that they were regarded as holy. So I guess in a roundabout way that means yes. But the fact that they paid for it with their lives and the fact that they approached the altar, all those things kind of get merged together. And also, those things were to serve as a reminder to others that if you haven't been summoned to bring something to the altar, you might not want to do that. All right, to remember things that are holy. Yes.
Hey, yeah, so I guess I have two things. One's an observation and then a question. So I really liked I know it was a loose analogy, but I really liked your Titanic analogy, actually, with the Korah being the iceberg and then the other rebels and stuff. My wife and I were talking about it in the car, and we were talking about the Titanic specifically, and if memory serves correctly, they were actually on it. They were trying to set a record, right? The Titanic was, and that's why they didn't handle the iceberg correctly. I guess if I've seen where if they had met the iceberg head on, they probably would have survived instead of trying to skirt around it or something.
That's what the experts say, yes.
Yeah, so, and I thought that was, as a useful analogy, like as a leader, I feel like that's probably the right response to deal with rebellion is just head on, right? Mm-hmm. My question is, all right, so if someone I don't have authority over is in rebellion, how do you know that it's rebellion? And then two, how would you address that as a peer sort of relationship?
Well, the relationship would have everything to do with it, whether or not I said anything or not. I don't get involved with wars that aren't mine, frankly. So if I don't have a relationship with somebody, I don't know them from Adam. Unless there's some very unique circumstance, it's something's, someone's being endangered, I'm not going to necessarily get involved with it. That being said, if I have a relationship with somebody, somebody I know very well, we have a rapport, we've talked, we can carry on a conversation, and then I see them in rebellion, even though I may not have any authority over them in one respect, that relationship gives me opportunity to speak into their life. And so I guess that's the key. What's the relationship? But, I don't tell people how to raise their children. I don't go into somebody's house and say, you're doing that all wrong. If I go into somebody's house, I respect their house rules. I may not agree with it, and if I don't agree with it, I may not go back. But I don't go into their house and just start taking over and tell them how to do that, because if someone come into my house and started doing that in my house, I'd show them the front door. So I don't get involved with battles and wars that aren't mine. If they involve me, my family, this congregation, okay, that's a different situation. But relationship, I think, has everything to do with it, okay? So if I see a friend, if I see someone that's just a very, a good acquaintance, we've talked, and we've talked about different things on maybe a more personal level. That could possibly open the door to saying, hey, think about this, or you need to think about that. And those kind of situations where you're not really sure, if I felt like I needed to say something, I would look for them to open the door for me to say something, rather than me just busting the door down and saying, hey. Because the typical person, if someone speaks into their life about a very sensitive issue, uninvited, what's the typical human response?
Yeah, it's not going to be good.
Well, they're going to shut you out. They're going to turn you off. Very rarely does you walk up to somebody cold, speak into their life about something that's going on. Very rarely do they just automatically, oh, you're right, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of that too can be conditioned and prepared, the ground prepared with prayer. Father, if you want me to speak into this person's life, then I need you to go before me. I need you to create an environment whereby the door is open for me to speak into their life. Because I am one of those people who just firmly believe that you can't convince somebody of something they don't want to be convinced of. You're not going to convince somebody just because it's right, and just because you're right, and just because this is the way it is. That doesn't mean that person is going to listen to you, heed your advice, and go do the right thing. They have to be ready to hear what you have to say. I'll use this illustration many times. Joseph's brothers, they were envious, they were jealous, they were hateful, they mistreated. Joseph was young, immature, not as discreet as he should be. Hey, God showed me that you guys are going to bow down to me. Isn't that great and wonderful news? You just need to get with the program. Well, how's the typical person going to respond to that? Who does he think he is, right? So initially, they weren't prepared to hear what he had to say. Time had to pass. He had to mature. They had to go through things. And then in time, God is the one who changed the circumstances. The message was the same, but the circumstances changed because God's the one who changed the circumstances. And when he changed the circumstances, they were ready to hear what he had to say, and they received it. So that's a big part of it as well. So anyway, if you can glean anything out of all of that.
Yeah,
That
no-
would be my response.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
Yes, sir. What was your name?
I'm John.
John. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to mention something as far as you brought up about the country and that you felt that it was ordained. And there's some things that were kind of going on with the Army about the whole vaccine stuff. It was really being pushed at us. And I remember when I transferred to my unit, they were pretty adamant on it. They were getting ready to go on a deployment to Kuwait, and I remember sitting in formation, and the commander was basically giving his explanation of if you don't get this, it's going to cause all this hang up on the front end and the back end. You're going to have to spend a lot of time, and it became a thing that was really felt kind of forced. And I ended up not going on that deployment. I was originally supposed to be going to Kuwait, and I guess that was just the way the Father had that worked out. But during the whole time, I was passed up for promotion after promotion, and I had all my prerequisites done. I could have went at any point, and I was told I could not go to BLC to get my E5 to get my sergeant because I wasn't vaccinated, and Big Army said I couldn't go to the school without it. And tying this back into the teaching as far as the Korah, the murmuring, there's no worse murmuring than there is in the military. I'll be honest with you. There is so much that goes on.
All these guys are nodding their head.
And I think that maybe that's where our country's getting to the point where it is now. So many people are murmuring, and good men aren't standing up and talking. Even in the military, we have a system where you go to petition your grievances, and even with the vaccine, there's you have exemptions. Like, you can file for exemptions and things like that. It's a long process, and I'm been without a promotion for going on a year and a half because I've been waiting this out. And I'll be honest, when I first started, there was people murmuring and talking bad, and I kind of got caught into that group of people. And people want to pretty much start a rebellion. It was really like a rebellion. Nobody wanted. There were 5 to 6 people that didn't even file for their exemption. They just said, "You know what? I'm not doing it." I saw them get kicked out about a month ago, and this is one of the things. If people just do right, go to their commanders and say their grievances, and if we have more and more people do this instead of just throwing the towel in and saying I give up, it's basically going opposite to what our country's about. That's why I think you said, as far as the country being ordained, there's systems in place to make changes. And even when things are going down the wrong turn, if good men stand up and speak to leaders in a positive manner, instead of where I was just, you get upset. It's like, why are they doing this? This is wrong. And just, you kind of put yourself in a area where you distance yourself from everyone else, and you stop being that light that you're supposed to be on the hill. That was really what I was doing, and I noticed that. And there was a guy who, he's not following the same line as far as a Torah-based foundation, but I was able to talk with him and build a friendship with him, and he was like, you know what, we shouldn't worry about this. This is in God's hand. And I finally realized, why did I not get this? Why am I not going to relax and know that the Father, if this is something He wants, I'll be either out of the military, and then wherever I go, it's His will. If I end up getting kicked out for this, then I get kicked out. And I know not everybody believes the same as far as vaccines go, and for me, it's just my own personal belief. But I think we should always be willing to go and talk and and do it in a way that's respectful. Even if it's with leadership that we don't agree with, we should be able to go to them and talk with them and not be running around murmuring to everybody else in the unit about how your commander's an idiot and like doesn't uphold the Constitution or doesn't believe in our rights and stuff like that. I think that's the kind of stuff that like Korah brings to seed, and then you start losing retention and people, and I think it definitely falls into this teaching.
Thank you. I agree. Yes. I think, Caleb, that a lot of times people who do wicked things are allowed to do that, placed there, maybe sometimes it's even orchestrated, to force good men to do the right things, to create an environment where they have to make a decision, where it is uncomfortable, they have to take a stand. It's apples and oranges. Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, carted off temple treasures to Babylon, carried off the princes of Judah, the men and women of Judah, and yet God calls him my servant. He was used as a chastening rod in one regard, but he was also used, going back to those three men, in Daniel chapter 3, he created a wicked environment. He was trying to force something on them that their conscience would not allow them to do, and they took a stand, and they did it respectfully. And because they did what was right, they served God in the right way, but they weren't disrespectful to the authority that God established, and they had to go through the fire, but God met them in that fire, brought them out of that fire, and as a result, that wicked ruler had to confess that the God of Israel was God. So that, to me, seems to be the proper way to address these things, to not just, roll over, take licks and say, thank you, sir, may I have another. I'm not saying that. But, to respectfully take a stand for what is right. Because ultimately in that, you're honoring God and not so much paying homage to a leader, because God can take that leader out anytime he wants to. He put him there, it's his business to take him out. It's my business to grow and to be the man of God, the woman of God that he put me here to be, as a light to those people. You think about when Paul was brought before Agrippa, and Festus, and how he respectfully stated his rights as a Roman citizen. He didn't compromise his message. He didn't act disrespectfully, but he stated, my rights as a Roman citizen. And, at one point, he had one of them say, Paul, you almost persuade me here, right? Because he did it the right way. So there's a lot to be said for that, I have my convictions about certain things. I'm kind of on the same, I take the same position you do on that particular issue. That's a matter of conscience. I have convictions about why I don't want to do this, I won't do this, etc. I'm not going to judge the next person who feels that they can or should or what have you. This is where I stand on the matter. And so if I have to take a stand on that, I will. I'll do it respectfully. I'll do it the right way. I may struggle at times when I think these people, well, never mind, I won't go down that road. But anyway, it needs to be done in a way that honors the Father, not dishonors his name. So thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Anyone else? All right. Everybody's good? That's fine by me, because here's what we're going to do. If everybody's good, I'm going to take a little break before we come back in at 5 and have our bar mitzvah service. But last call. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to this conversation before we dismiss for the day, or before we end this for the day? Okay. Do you want to take this opportunity to, or do we want to wait till the kids come back when do birthdays and such? When we do it and then the kids come back? All right, so here's what we're going to do. Live stream. We're going to go ahead and tell you bye-bye and have a great day. And is that bye-bye, or you have something you want to say?